Today together, we're making apple crumbles with oat and hemp heart streusel topping. This is the Kitchenista cooking class, so grab those ingredients and cook along with me. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel for more recipes and culinary medicine. The first thing we're gonna do for this recipe is we're going to get our fruit washed and ready to use. I'm using apples. They're apples that have been in my fridge for a couple days too long. They have a few bruises. Perfect. It's a great way to repurpose like almost spoiled but not quite yet fruit. So if you have peaches that are getting a little too soft, use them in this kind of crumble recipe. You could also use, by the way, I've used frozen fruit in this recipe before too. So that's a good little trick too, in case you want something sweet, you want to make a recipe but you don't have any fresh fruit at home, just use frozen fruit. Frozen berries are great. I think that the skin in a crumble just changes the texture a bit. You do not have to peel them. You don't even care about the skin, all good. Don't even worry about it. One. Option for these peels, you could put them in a compost pile in the backyard. My chickens love them. If you don't have chickens and you don't have a compost pile, you could just bury them into the soil of your flower or vegetable garden just to enrich the soil. Or if you wanted to, maybe a little odd, but you could, add them to a freezer bag. Last time we spoke, right, we were making broth and soup and we were keeping a freezer bag of scraps in our freezer for the next time we made broth or soup. You could put it right into your broth bag in your freezer. So I have 5 apples, just what I had. What's really nice about this recipe, not all baking recipes, but this recipe in particular, is you don't have to measure really. You can kind of just use what you have. And say you had, I don't know, say you had only 3 apples, but you're like, I want to make a bigger batch, use apples and some frozen berries, right? You can get creative with baking at home. And you know, not every recipe will come out the same, maybe not even good, but you know, it's a work in progress. It's always good to practice and use what you've got. All right, so once we have all of our apples peeled, I like to peel them all at once and then chop them all at once. We're gonna chop them. And you wanna chop them in small enough pieces that when they cook, they soften, but they don't become actual mush, right? You don't want to chop them too small. So I would say maybe 1/4-inch pieces, like that. Not too small. You want your crumble to have some texture, but you also don't want them to be crunchy and hard, right? So you kind of want to make sure that you're cutting them small enough just till that streusel crumble topping gets cooked and golden brown and crispy, and then you can pull it out and they'll be perfectly soft. If you're unsure, like if you've never made this recipe before, cut them smaller to be safe the first time you make it, and then the next time you can always adjust. This is also a great place, by the way, to sneak in vegetables. So this crumble topping is very sweet and you're getting all the sweetness from the fruit. And then we're gonna, in the streusel topping, we'll have some sweetness as well. You could add vegetables, like carrots would be great here, even some cauliflower or squash, and no one will even know. I mean, you don't wanna add too much, but maybe add like 1 part veg to 4 parts fruit, or even 2 to 4. I think you'd be okay depending on the fruit. Like squash, you could definitely get away with doing 2 parts veg, 4 parts fruit. I like to put it directly in my baking dish. So I'm using today, this is a Our Place non-stick baking dish. You can use any baking dish that you like. Whatever you have at home is great. You can even use, if you don't have a baking dish and you want to use a pie plate, you can do that. I've even done something like this if you don't have a pie plate or a baking dish. You can even use a stock pot or something that's oven safe. Also great. Cast iron skillet would be fine too. If you wanted to chop up your fruit ahead of time, you knew you were maybe making this for an event and it was the next day, just add some lemon juice to your apples so they don't get brown. But honestly, once you cook it, you're not really gonna be able to tell. So definitely an easy make ahead dessert. You could even prep the whole thing, streusel topping and all, with the fruit, streusel topping, and just pop it in the fridge. And then whenever you have this event or whenever you want to bake this, just pop it in the oven then. Almost done. All right, apples are done. They're chopped. So now with our apples, I'm going to add some apple pumpkin pie spice. This is a homemade version. I have this recipe on my website. You could use cinnamon if you wanted to only. You could use apple pie spice and pumpkin pie spice and cinnamon if you like more of a cinnamony flavor. I think pumpkin pie, apple pie spice has that nutmeg, the clove, it has a little spice to it. Whatever you want is totally fine. Give it a mix. Already it smells divine. So good. Layer one, done. All right, I have everything I need for the streusel topping. Same bowl that I had my apple peels in, so we're not gonna dirty something else. First ingredient is oats. If you need a gluten-free version of this recipe, make sure you're getting a certified gluten-free oat, all right? We don't want anyone to feel poorly after they eat this or have allergic reactions. So I like, by the way, in terms of amounts, I like an equal amount fruit to an equal amount crumble topping. I like it to be like a 50-50 split, same thing with coffee cake. If you're doing it any other way, I'm sorry, I think you're wrong. So we're making a hefty amount of the streusel topping. So oats are hemp hearts. These are whole hemp seeds, so they don't have that fibrous outer shell. They're very soft, very nutty. I think it does give such a really nice flavor to the streusel topping. A little bit of a nutty, kind of earthy, whole, against the sweet, it plays so nicely. This is flour. I'm using almond flour, again, doubling down on that really nutty flavor. If you needed a nut-free version of this recipe, use whole wheat flour, use oat flour, certified gluten-free oats, use corn flour, whatever you want. We don't need as much of this, just a little bit to have it all come together. So I'd say in terms of ratios, you're basically doing 2 part oats to 1 part hemp seeds to a half a part of flour. Next, we have same pumpkin pie spice, apple pie spice. You could add just cinnamon if you wanted, but I really like the spiciness of the ginger, the clove, the nutmeg. I like a lot of it too. So we're gonna give this a mix just to incorporate all of the dry ingredients. And of course, whole grain oats. There's great fiber there, right? There's fiber in our nuts, there's fat, there's protein. So we're really hitting a lot of macronutrients with this recipe. And fiber is great for blood glucose control, right? Fiber can help feed those beneficial gut bacteria. So some fibers are prebiotics. Soluble fiber specifically can help lower LDL cholesterol levels and is great for promoting cardiovascular health. So a lot to love about the ingredients that we're using in this crumble here today. I'm not using butter to bind this. I'm actually going to use an applesauce date paste. So date paste is a great way to add some sugar here, but also adding those minerals and the fiber from the dates. So we're adding some sweetness and we're adding some nutrition. So I'm gonna add that in here, and it's sticky and it's mushy, and it's gonna help us make this like molassesy, ooey gooey streusel topping. It's gonna be so good. And to make the date paste, all I did, and I just put those in my food processor with a little water and applesauce and process until they're smooth. You could soak dates in water ahead of time. That'll make this a little bit easier and make them a little softer, but you absolutely do not have to. In here, look, it's like so sticky, yummy. What we're gonna do is we can modify here. We can add more flour if we need to. We can add more applesauce or date paste. We can make more in the food processor. We're just going to mix this all together until we start to get larger chunks of the streusel topping. This recipe is just so forgiving, and you can really get creative. And if you wanted to in this topping add raisins, you could do that. If you wanted to add walnuts, you can do that. You can really just get your hands dirty in the kitchen. What a great activity, right? This is where you get your kids, you start to clean up the dishes in the food processor, you ask your kids to mix the rest of the streusel topping. But this is exactly what I want. I might add a little bit more flour just to dry it out a bit, but this is kind of exactly what I'm looking for, where it just starts to become crumbly and stick together on its own. So you know what, I think I'm good here. I'm not gonna add more flour on second thought. Now we are ready to add it to our apples. And all you do is I like to add little chunks like this. Kind of work it through your fingers. Break it up into littler pieces. And the littler pieces, because when it cooks, all that hot air is going to go into all those crevices and it's gonna get crispy and crunchy. So good. Do that. And you can see that this is gonna be a thick layer of streusel topping. But how easy was this recipe, right? And you know, it's great if you want to do this for breakfast. You could absolutely eat this for breakfast, for snack, for dessert, whatever. I just like it because I had those apples that were just a couple days too old and I just need to get rid of them, right? So why not? And don't be alarmed if your doorbell rings because the smell of this is vented outside and your neighbors smell it and they're like, what are you baking? What are you cooking? It's just that divine, that heavenly. They'll come knocking, they'll want a piece, they'll want a bite. My date paste wasn't 100% smooth. It wasn't like a puree, so there are still little pieces of date in here, which is great because it's going to give texture and chew and a great molassesy type flavor if you've never had a date. Plus, dates are high in magnesium, dietary magnesium, fiber, so really great. And it's gonna give us all that sweetness without added sugar. So we did not add syrup, we did not add honey, we did not add cane sugar, nothing. So now this is going to go in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit until those apples are soft and bubbly and the topping is brown and crispy. You can find this full recipe at thewellnesskitchenista.com. Make sure you subscribe here on YouTube for more cooking classes just like this one.